Training for a race or a race build is always something that's really fascinating to me because there's so many ways you can go about training for a race. How do you structure your running to meet that goal time in a race? Now, as a runner, I'm someone who doesn't race a lot. In fact, if you follow this channel, you know I haven't raced in about 2 years. It's actually been 2 years and 1 week since my last race, which was the New York City Marathon back in 2023, which didn't quite go to plan. I'll put a link in the description to the final video of my training series for that kind of talks about what happened in the race, but it didn't really go that well. Over the past 2 years, I've stepped back from racing a little bit, not because I was burned out or that race really kind of killed my desire to run. I'm super competitive. Made a whole video about that, link in the description for that as well. It's more I wanted to kind of reconnect with running, my running, and really focus on building more durability, building more fitness, just base fitness, not specific race fitness, just base fitness overall. And that's really what I've been focused on for the past 2 years, just enjoying my running, connecting to my running. I run to run. I don't run to race. I love racing. I love that running has racing in it, but I don't run to race. So when I do race, it is a bit of a special thing. And I will finally be racing again in December of this year, which will be next month as of recording this video. So I thought I'd sit down and talk about what my goals are, how I'm planning that, what tools I'm actually using, and probably what's most important to some of you, what shoes I'm actually running in, and what I'll actually be racing in. So with all that out of the way, let's jump in. To get started, here's the race I'll be doing, the Taipei Marathon. Specifically, I'll be doing the half. It'll be on Sunday, December 21st at 6:30 a.m. Now, end of December, I think is a weird time for a lot of people in the West as far as running, but here in Taiwan, this is kind of prime time racing season because it's the only time of year where you can depend on somewhat cooler temperatures. And this race can be brutally cold. I'm talking 6 to 8 degrees Celsius, which is upper 40s to 50 degrees with a lot of wind. And it can be up into the 20s Celsius, which is 70s, 80s Fahrenheit. It can kind of be all over the place with the weather, but it will be very humid in this. Now, I'm specifically going to run the half because, frankly, I haven't run a half marathon in about 3 years, and I really love this distance. Specifically to the Taipei Marathon, I actually really love this course. This is a course that I have my previous PR on, which I'll talk about in a bit. And it's just a really great, fun course that feels really fast. And I'm going for a PR in this year's race. Now, looking at this course, it's a flat course with a lot of straightaways. And there's really only 3 pieces of elevation in this course. There's a bridge around the 11.5, 12K mark. There's a highway on-ramp at the 15K mark. And that's probably the steepest piece of elevation on the course. And then there's a bridge going into the 20K mark where you're kind of coming back into the city, crossing a river. It's more of a downhill than an uphill. But overall, this is a very flat, very fast course that I really specifically think I can finally get a PR for the half marathon that I've always been trying to get. So going into this race, I have 2 goals, an A goal and a B goal. My A goal is to break a 90-minute half marathon. So 1 hour, 29 minutes, 30 seconds. That is my A goal. That's what I'm specifically training for. Now, my previous PR is 1:34:38. That was back in 2021, actually at the Taipei Half Marathon. And I feel like over the past 3 years, I have gained a lot of fitness. I have gained a lot of durability. I'm a better runner than I was. So a 5-minute gap here doesn't feel unachievable. And frankly, the paces that I'm running in this training plan to hit this goal don't feel like I'm reaching at all. They feel quite comfortable, which gives me a lot of hope that this A goal should be quite easy for me to tick off. Therefore, my B goal is this. I want to get as close to 1 hour, 25 minutes as I possibly can. Now, 1:29 to 1:25 is a big jump, but if I can get the 1:29:30 and feel comfortable doing that, I think I can go after what else I can get closer to 1:25. Ideally, I'm going to do a negative split, so I'll go out somewhat conservative in the first half of the race, try to do the negative split in the second half of the race, and if I'm feeling good, that's where I'll go faster than my training plan and the paces that I'm actually running to hit that 1:29:30, to get as close as I can to the 1:25. But my goal here is that A goal. That's what I'm shooting for. So a sub 90 half marathon. And how I'm going to achieve that is literally by the book, with this book, The Daniels Running Formula from Jack Daniels. Now, I have been running with Jack Daniels' plans and strategies and approaches for many, many years. I've used his V.02 system to do pacing really for as long as I can really remember. It's just been a constant in my running. And this book I've always referred back to. I've always gone and cherry picked some things that I like out of this book to put a build together, but for this build, I'm specifically going to be using his half marathon plan. However, he doesn't actually have a half marathon plan in this book. You can even see that on the cover. Jack is kind of an old school coach, and I think he comes from that class of coaching that saw track distances, middle distance, cross country distances, and then the marathon. And anything between maybe a 15K, which is kind of a cross country distance, and the marathon didn't really exist. The half marathon back in his day wasn't really a thing that any serious runner took fairly seriously. And I've had earlier versions of this book, this is the 4th edition that I'm showing you here, that didn't even have anything referencing a half marathon, or it referenced a half marathon of just do the marathon training plan, but just cut the distances and volume down a little bit. But in the 4th edition, they actually have chapter 15, which is the 15 to 30K chapter, or what Jack calls the Alien Program. And it's a very short chapter. It's a 3-page chapter. And in it, it gives you a very basic, fundamental, very Daniel structure for racing any distance, really 15 to 30K. And that's what I'm actually going to be going over in this video. Now, the byline for the chapter, and I think this is really the byline for my approach to this entire build, is pay attention to time spent training and not so much the distance covered. So even though I'm shooting for a 60 to 90K a week as far as weekly volume, which is about 37 to 55 miles per week, I'm not really focused on any sort of volume number per end of week. I'm really just focused on the quality of the training, specifically a few workouts, and that gets into my build emphasis here. I am emphasizing threshold sessions, threshold running. I am putting everything sort of on that because that's what I feel I need. Everything else is secondary to that. So any other running I'm doing will be recovery for the threshold sessions. Easy runs will be easy. And I'm emphasizing threshold sessions because, again, that's what I feel I really need. That's where I'm really lacking, and I need to build the endurance at a threshold pace, which is a little bit faster than ultimately my race pace, to really achieve this sub 90 half marathon time that I want. So let's get into pacing. Now, Daniel's V.02 system uses 5 pace ranges: easy, marathon, threshold, interval, and repetition. And using the V.running calculator, which I'll put a link in the description, you can see a link on screen. There's also an app that you can get to your phone that you can enter your prospective race time, and it'll give you all of this pacing for you. It's a great system. Again, I've used it for years. This is what I get. My easy paces, now I run in kilometers, so I'll put the mile paces in gray next to this. But my easy range will be 5:01 to 5:32 per kilometer. My marathon pace will be 4:25 per kilometer. My threshold pace will be 4:10 per kilometer. My interval pace will be 3:50 per kilometer. My rep pace will be 3:35 per kilometer. And then what's really, I think, important here are the heart rate ranges. Now, my max heart rate is 189 BPM. I've used that for a couple years. I'm pretty confident in that number. I've touched that a few times over the past few months, and I really do feel it. But what's important here are the heart rate ranges that Daniels prescribes to these pace ranges. So for the easy, that's 110 really to 140 BPM, so 59 to 74% of my max heart rate. Marathon pace is 141 to 159. Threshold, which is the real important one here, is 160 to 166 BPM, or 85 to 88% of my max heart rate. Interval is 179 to 189, really getting up to my max heart rate. And rep, according to Daniels, is 105 to 120% above max heart rate. I'm never seeing those heart rates. I'm never going to see 198 to 226. If I did, I'm probably not going to be here to make more videos. It's just I'm not going to be seeing that. But again, these are how Daniels prescribes this. Now, since it is so hot and humid here in Taiwan, I don't train by heart rate anymore. I used to back in New York, but I don't here. I do look at it, I do use it as a yardstick to judge effort to pace. So for the past few months, I've been doing my easy runs to make sure that I stay under 140 BPM, which in that pace, even a little bit faster than that, is definitely very comfortable for me. And I've been putting a lot of emphasis on that 410 per kilometer pace for threshold running to stick within 160 to 166. On some super hot days that we had back in September, that was a little difficult. But now that it's cooled off just a little bit, I am seeing that averaging out around 162, 163 quite comfortably in that pace range, that 410 per kilometer, and it works really well. So again, these paces feel really good. The threshold pace feels achievable. It doesn't feel like I'm really reaching, as Daniels describes his threshold pace. It should be something that is easy to do or comfortable to do, but you want it to end. And that's definitely how it feels, and I definitely do notice that. Now, there is one other pace in here, and that's hard, that Daniels prescribes, which ends up being your race pace. That's something that isn't one of his paces, but it is something that he does prescribe a couple workouts to do, and I'll get into that in a bit. So keep that in mind as I move forward. My weekly structure will be as such. There'll be an A week and a B week, and that's something that's prescribed in this alien plan. There is a subtle difference between these 2 weeks, and they'll alternate through the entire plan. They both confine to a very typical Daniels structure of 3-2-1, 3 easy runs, 2 sessions or workouts, and a long run. There's an alternative day in there that can be another easy day, but it's generally prescribed as a rest day. And even though I'm showing that all the running is very structured in this, I am very flexible in here where I can move things around as life happens, weather happens, all of that sort of stuff. So typically the A week and the B week will have a Monday, Wednesday, Saturday easy running. The Monday, Wednesday sessions will be a little bit more focused around just going out and being easy, focusing on foot strike and putting some strides in there, whether it's at the end or during the run themselves. 45 to 75 minutes, somewhere in that range. The Saturday easy run is really just a 1 hour cruise. Really not even concerned about pace, just going out there and cruising and really doing time on feet. Now, the 2 workouts per week will be a Tuesday and a Friday for me. In the A week, that will be 2 threshold sessions. In the B week, that will be a threshold session on Tuesday and a interval or rep session on Friday. Again, subtle difference there, but I think it will definitely benefit me, and I've already noticed that it has benefited for me in the running that I've done in this plan thus far. And then Sunday will be my long run. In the A week, that's just a long run. Go out and get 80 to 110 minutes, 16 to 22K-ish, somewhere in there. That's typically what I'd be doing in that time range. And then in the B week, it'll be a long run of 90 minutes of marathon pace. So it is a long run. There's a lot of easy running in there, but it's more of a fartlek. I'll be alternating that marathon pace or that race pace in there in certain sessions. And I'll talk about specifically what that is in a bit. In that week, there's 3 types of running or 3 types of workouts. There's threshold sessions, interval or rep sessions, and marathon pace, the long run, the one I was just talking about. The types of workouts I'll be doing in the threshold sessions are these types of things. 4 to 6 by 6 to 8 minutes at threshold pace with 2-minute rests in between. Walking generally, maybe light jogging, standing around if I need it. And that second run would be 2 by 12 to 20 minutes at threshold pace with 3-minute rests in between. So basically the way that would work in the A week is, say I did a 5 by 6 minute threshold pace on Tuesday. That means that second threshold session would be a 2 by 12 minute with the 3-minute rest. So I'd be doing the same volume, but I'm doing it in longer stretches. And these would be alternating. So if I add more time in that Tuesday session, I'll just lengthen the time in that Thursday session or Friday session, depending on what day I actually do that. And again, pretty straightforward as far as threshold sessions. There's a few other options that Jack gives for threshold work, but I've found over the years these 2 workouts work really well for me, and they work really well together in a given week. And Jack tends to be fairly minimalist in his workouts. He's not one for big creative workouts and every workout's different. He's very much a coach that was focused on, here's your workout, nail the workout, get the work done, and come back and do it again and again and again and again. And he would typically have a lot of plans where you're doing the same workout over and over and over. And I actually quite like that. Now, interval sessions are going to be as such: 6 to 8 by 800 or around 3 minutes. It's pretty much the same thing for me. At interval pace, so faster than threshold, with 1 minute easy jog. Ideally, you're still moving, you're jogging, not standing or walking, and really hitting that as an interval. Or I could do a more classic thing like 10 to 12 reps of 400 at the rep pace with a 200 jog in between, and then some walk in between that to get up to the line to do the next 400. Now, I'm not going to be emphasizing these types of workouts in this session or in this build. I will be doing a few of them, specifically that 800 workout. I actually quite like that one. I did it this past week. It's just nice to kind of get the blood flowing and go a little bit faster than what I've been doing with threshold, but not really crushing myself. The pace that I need to run at interval is, I wouldn't say it's a pace I want to spend a lot of time at, but it's a pace that I can hit and achieve and run these 800s and get a really good workout in. So again, my focus is the threshold sessions in this build, but I am going to do alternating weeks with some interval sessions, one a week, where I just keep that kind of twitch muscle going. And then the marathon pace, or that long run, will be a fartlek essentially. And it'll be something like this, where it'll be 5 to 8 1K over the 90 minutes with a 2-minute jog in between, 2 minutes easy running in between. It could also be 2 to 3 by 5K at hard pace with 3-minute rest in between. Probably more 2 by 5K because I'm not doing a really long run here. My long runs are going to be, as I said, 16 to 22 kilometers for this type of run. Or I could do 10 by 3 minutes at hard pace with one run at easy in between. Again, this is at hard pace. This will be at my actual race pace, so 4 minutes 15 per kilometer. And really just trying to get used to how that feels so that I know that I'm running at that pace. That's specifically why he's always prescribed these for this type of racing and this type of build for both a half and more full marathon. When I've used Jack Daniels for full marathons, this marathon pace run is really kind of a big deal in that, and that's where I'm gleaning a lot of the reason for why he prescribes this one for this build. And then looking at the past 4 months and really the 16 weeks of this build, I started this back at the beginning of September. We are now, as the recording of this, in the second week of November, so I've already been in this plan a bit. There's been a few phases in this for me. The early phase in September is what I call a base phase. I was coming out of a summer very low volume. Summers here in Taipei are super hot, super humid, and having lived here for 5 summers, I know I can't push myself super hard because I'm going to dig a big hole for myself, not only per week, but for the fall. And since I'm racing this fall, or really winter, I want to make sure that I didn't push too hard and do too much over the summer. So I was doing the bare minimum that I could to maintain basic fitness, form, and really work on durability. So it wasn't a lot of heavy volume. But in the final week of September, really the first week of October, I started what I'm calling phase 1 of this build. And that's where I was getting used to structured running again. I was going into that structure. I was doing the 2 threshold workouts per week with 1 long run per week. And I was really upping my weekly volume to at least 64 kilometers or 40 miles per week. And again, just trying to get a feel for structured running again. And it was actually quite good. I actually quite enjoyed that 3-week stint. I actually started a little bit in week 13, so I was starting it a little bit ahead of time. So I really did 4 weeks of this, and it felt really good. It gave me a lot of confidence to know that I don't think this goal time is a huge reach. It's a little bit of a reach, but it's not a huge reach, and I think it's very achievable. Now, there is a phase 2 in this, and unfortunately, week 9 and week 8 of this build, I had some personal travel back to the States for 2 weeks, essentially, with time zones and all the shift going on. Not running related at all. In fact, I knew I was going to be doing very little running because I was just super busy every day with some personal stuff. And it turned out that over that time, I really did not run at all. I did 1 run while I was in the States, and when I got back to here in Taiwan in the end of week 8, after I got over a day of jet lag, I did some more sessions, kind of just got used to running, got my legs kind of running again after just 2 weeks of being super busy, doing some physical labor and just all sorts of other stuff. It was good to get back out there. So phase 2 appeared at really not the best time, but I'm making the best of it with this plan. And this is where I think building a build for a race, you need to be somewhat flexible. I knew this travel was going to be in there, so I planned for it accordingly. That's why there was a phase 1, phase 2, and now where I am, phase 3. Now, phase 3 is really a 7-week, 2 race day, really 6 weeks of quality training, where I'm really going to focus on this plan. And the goal here is to really nail those workouts, the threshold workouts, and really emphasize that type of running. There'll be some intervals in here, but mostly I'm going to be focused on those threshold sessions, nailing them, and then recovering for them in between. And again, easy runs are easy. That's sort of my mantra for this entire build. Make sure I can show up for those threshold runs feeling as fresh as I can, and everything else is really just easy to be easy, and I'm really not stressed about volume or time. And if I need to cut runs short because I know that I'm digging a hole for myself and I'm not going to be able to get up to the start of that threshold session the next day or sometime later in the week, I'm going to cut it short. Again, emphasize the threshold running here. And then week 1 is really race week, which is really just a continuation of phase 3, but it's mostly easy. There's one short threshold session in there. There's a rest day right before race day, and race day will be December 21st, which is the Sunday, and I'm really looking forward to that. Now, specifically, what shoes have I been using and what shoes do I plan on racing in for this actual race? Back in base and phase 1, these were really the shoes I was running in. My daily shoe was the Puma Velocity Nitro 4. The daily tempo shoes were the Asics Mega Blast and the Nike Vomero Plus. The Vomero Plus showed up towards the end of this, at the end of August for me. But again, was really enjoying both those shoes. And then by phase 1, once I started bringing in the threshold running, I was really depending on the Asics Metaspeed Sky Tokyo for that specifically. And I did the first 4 weeks of the threshold running specifically in that shoe, and it worked really well. These 4 shoes, basically what I was running in most of the summer. The Velocity Nitro 4 was a shoe I was spending a lot of time in over the summer. Once I got the Mega Blast and the Vomero Plus, really I began to move more towards those 2 shoes just because I was super impressed with both those shoes and their versatility, what they allow me to do, the speed in them, the recovery aspects of them, the leg savings of them. They just were really great. And then when I knew I was going to bring in threshold running and I wanted a plated shoe, that's where the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo came in, because I did want to spend some time in that shoe because I'm really, really impressed with that shoe. So this is what I did base in phase 1 in. I had nothing to complain about any of these shoes. In fact, I think the Velocity Nitro 4 with the Mega Blast and a Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, I think that's a great 3-shoe rotation that can kind of cover every need. But I'm a Nike runner. I knew I was going to be racing in a Nike shoe, so ultimately I'm going to transition into a full Nike rotation. Again, that's me. That's just how I am. That's basically me going back to what I know works. But again, in base and phase 1, I knew these shoes worked well, and I was super impressed with them. And if I had to carry these through into racing, I definitely could. Though I did have some reservations about the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo specifically for this half marathon course. Phase 2, which was that phase of travel back to the States for about 2 weeks, the only shoe I brought with me for that entire trip was the Nike Vomero Plus, just because, again, I've been really impressed with how versatile this shoe is, very much like the Asics Mega Blast, but specifically I think the Vomero Plus is a little bit more gentle on the body because it's a little bit softer and there's a little bit more flex in the shoe, which is exactly what I want. Again, where I'm emphasizing easy so I can recover for that threshold sessions. That's why I picked the Vomero Plus specifically for that. Plus, it was just a great transition shoe. I've been really impressed with the Vomero Plus for its leg savingsness, but also its nimbleness, its versatility. It's a shoe I can pick up pace to get into threshold in, but it's not a shoe I typically want to just use for threshold running. Again, really impressed with this shoe. I think it's been really quite eye-opening for me for how versatile a max cushion shoe can actually be. And that leads me into phase 3, which is where I'm going to talk about what I'll actually be racing in. Now, in phase 3, my daily tempo shoe is still the Nike Vomero Plus. That's the shoe that I'm relying on for pretty much everything when I'm not going out specifically for threshold or recovery. The Vomero Plus has been excellent for that. My daily easy shoe, really the recovery shoe in this part of the build, is the Nike Vomero Premium. I've been really impressed with this shoe as a specific recovery shoe, something that's going to have high leg savingsness, but also just pamper my feet and my legs and make sure that I'm recovered for those threshold sessions. Could I do that in the Nike Vomero Plus? Absolutely. Do I need the Vomero Premium? No, I think I could do all of this work in the Vomero Plus. But I do have the Vomero Premium, and again, I'm really curious how much I can get out of that shoe. In my review for the Vomero Premium, I said I was probably going to be spending most of the time in that shoe. I think now, realistically, in phase 3, it's going to be about a 60-40 split between the Vomero Premium and the Vomero Plus. Most of those easy runs, especially the early in the week easy runs, are going to be in the Vomero Plus. The Saturday session and the long slow run will probably be in the Nike Vomero Premium. And then for the marathon pace run, that kind of fartlek, that 90-minute fartlek, that's either going to be in the Vomero Plus or what I'm actually racing in. So my race shoe is this, the Nike Vaporfly 4. That shouldn't be a surprise for anyone who's watched this channel. And since I got that shoe back in the late spring, early summer, I knew that was what I wanted to be racing in this fall. In fact, I actually have 2 pairs of them. Nike sent me a pair for review, and then I bought a pair. So my plan here is for training, I'm going to run a pair of Vaporfly 4s into the ground. I don't really care about durability of it. I'm going to do all my threshold running, maybe some of the longer marathon pace work in that as well. And whatever happens to the shoe, I don't care, because I'll be racing in a fresh pair come race day. Now, as far as race shoes go, I am going to leave the door open to the Nike Alphafly 3. I really enjoyed my time in the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. The high plate configuration surprisingly worked extremely well for my feet, though the instability in that shoe is ultimately where I think it wasn't as efficient. As soon as I transitioned into the Nike Vaporfly 4, I immediately felt how planted that shoe felt, how stable that shoe felt underfoot, which is exactly what I want for this faster course. That does have some 90-degree turns, and there is some undulating pavement in a couple areas where there's some heavy bus lanes, so there's some sort of channeling in the road. But generally, I know the Vaporfly 4 is going to be much more stable. And that first threshold session that I did, moving from the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo to the Vaporfly 4, I immediately saw in my data how much more efficient the Vaporfly 4 is for me. But I did enjoy that high plate configuration, so I am going to keep the door open to the Alphafly 3. I may do a threshold session or 2 in that. I may not. I may just do them all in the Vaporfly 4. There's an outside chance I could actually race in the Alphafly 3. I don't think that's going to be the case because, again, the Vaporfly 4 is exactly what I want in a half marathon shoe. It's light, it's nimble, it's fast, it's planted. I don't feel like I'm lacking any cushioning in that shoe. In fact, I think if I was going to go run a marathon this year, I probably would seriously consider the Vaporfly 4 for that as well. Because again, I'm not lacking any kind of cushioning or protection in that shoe. And the low plate configuration with that plate right on the ground just feels so good. But again, the Alphafly 3 is somewhere between a Vaporfly 4 and a Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. The plate is a high plate configuration, but it's not quite as close to the foot as it is in the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. So I'm curious to run in that shoe again. It's been a while since I've run in the Alphafly 3, especially doing anything fast. So I'm going to give it a shot if I feel like I need something as an alternative to the Vaporfly 4. Let me address the elephant in the room here. If you follow this channel, you know that the shoes I just walked through are not typically shoes that I would spend a lot of time in. I'm a runner who typically likes lower stack shoes. I'm not running a max cushion shoes very often. But things change a little bit. As a runner, I think I'm adapting, and I'm really impressed with the versatility in the 2025 Max Cushion shoes, particularly the Asics Mega Blast and the Nike Vomero Plus. I think they've been brilliant. There's a few others out there, but those are the 2 I reviewed on this channel, and those are the 2 I've spent the most time in. Now, since I am emphasizing the recovery aspect in this build and making sure I can nail those threshold runs, I do want a little bit more foam underfoot. General running, I'm still going to go back to things like a Pegasus, probably the Velocity Nitro 4 again. After this race is over, back in January, I'm probably going to be back in those lower stack shoes. In fact, I can guarantee it. But for this build, I'm curious how far I can get with these Max Cushion shoes and how much I can recover to be fresh for the threshold sessions and ultimately how this build will go overall. So I'm more curious how I can get on with these shoes. The other thing I think people are wondering is, Going from the Vomero Plus and the Vomero Premium to the Vaporfly, which is a lower stack super shoe, does it feel weird? All I can say is it feels absolutely brilliant. I made a video a while back that said make super shoes special again. Link in the description to that video. But moving from those max cushion shoes that have limited flexibility, though again, the Vomero Plus does have more flexibility in it than you would think, going to a shoe that's a little bit lower to the ground, a little bit more flat feeling, and there is a lot of flexibility in the Vaporfly platform in general. It just feels great. It makes that feel like that special super shoe again, which I think is something that's lost right now in 2025 as far as super shoes versus trainers go. I really like that. It reminds me of way back in the day going from a Nike Epic React into a Vaporfly 4%, where the 4% did feel like a flat. It felt like a shoe to go fast in, and the Epic React felt like a big kind of soft shoe to do training in. Kind of back to that, and I actually really like that. I'm not finding any sort of problems going between those two shoes, and in fact, going from the Vomero Plus to the Vaporfly, one day to the other, it doesn't feel that strange. The Vaporfly 4, even though it is lower stack, and I think that's why a lot of people don't like that shoes, I think it doesn't have enough cushion for racing, half marathon or full marathon, I would disagree. It actually feels really great. It doesn't feel super low to the ground. It just feels much more nimble. It feels much more planted. It feels much more like a flat, and that's what I want in a race shoe. So I hope this video was both interesting and helpful for you to actually learn how to build a structured build for a race. Now there's tons of coaching platforms out there. There's tons of apps that will create plans on the fly based on what your goals are for a race, and they're fine. But I think it's really important to understand the basics of training, the fundamentals of training, and I think there's no better than to go to Jack Daniels' books and his plans and his V.02 system. Again, link in the description to that calculator for pacing and all that other stuff. I highly recommend any runner, even if you're going to use one of those automated plans and coaching platforms, to understand the fundamentals of training and how you can go about doing a structured build, how you go about putting that together, or why the plan that you've actually selected is built the way it is. Most plans are all going to follow the basic structure that I talked about here. The Daniels plan is very specific with a few things, but overall its structure is pretty general, and I think a lot of other plans would follow this. So if you have any questions on this stuff, let me know in the comments. I'm always curious to have that conversation, and I'm happy to help wherever I can. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. If neither one of those options are good for you, leave a comment and a like because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.